You can encourage them to say, you know what? If Sarah and Jordan really did get caught having sex when they were there in the cult and got kicked out because of it, why do none of you remember that happening?
And after once she started, like actually even after joining the Adina, multiple times she expressed that sexual predator which is in her in multiple ways. Like she was trying to misbehave with sannyasis, the monks who were residing there, and even some of the program participants who would come from different countries. So each time she does that, she was banned from being part of the Adinam. And like, every time she, like, the way especially the violent way how she expresses it, so she'll be immediately banned from the Adina.
You know? If really this took place, why did nobody say so until they spoke out in a Vice docu-series?
Like she was trying to misbehave with sannyasis, the monks who were residing there, and even some of the program participants who would come from different countries. So each time she does that, she was banned from being part of the Adinam. And like, every time she, like, the way especially the violent way how she expresses it, so she'll be immediately banned from the Adinam.
Actually, one point I want to tell here, that Sangha being an ecosystem that Swamiji has given openly for people to come, work on themselves and transform. So Sangha is a safe place for many of us, where we come, and many of them have so many traumas that they go through in their childhood, so many patterns, emotionally affected, and so many things that people go through. Sangha is a spiritual ecosystem, almost like a spiritual incubator that Swamiji has given so that people can work on their transformations. But banning people happens when they misuse that space of the Sangha to not transform, but to manipulate people's weak points and try to be abusive.
And not just that, the way how this dirty laundry was expressing herself, she had left the Adinam in between, and again she had requested and she had come and joined back the Adinam. And during this gap, she had become an implant.
Why didn't this rumor come out when they first made a YouTube video together years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's part of the reason I think it's important we do this. But I mean, without patting ourselves on the back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into a look how great what we're doing is speech. But I felt this is important to say because I've seen people very unfairly push you to this, Jordan, and say, why are you still being quiet? You're part of the problem if you're not speaking up. And that's just bullshit. When Jordan was in his time of leaving, there was another lady considering leaving who reached out to him, and he told her everything that happened to him in the cult. And when she kind of backswung into devotion to the fraud because of the brainwashing that had been implanted, she reported his conversation to the administration. And Jordan was one of the people falsely accused of being part of a drug smuggling ring.
It's just ridiculous.
Which is just ridiculous. And that false accusation of the five of you, that's why I went forward about the child abuse. Because I thought, well, shit, they're going to start saying this kind of BS about me too. So I better come out with it before that happens, while I've still got a bunch of them as friends so that they see it. But anyhow, maybe now is a good time, Jordan, to share with the public what you told to these other devotees. Like, what happened to you in the cult that you feel people need to know?
So what happened to me was, I'll just get right into it. So what happened to me was actual trauma of like having to do all this stuff with him, and I said no. I said no on going to a certain extent. He wanted me, to give him a blowjob.
Months later, he finally agrees to get busy and unveils this tiny mess of a thing that wouldn't even reach your molars.
And drink his cum. He wanted me to eat his cum, and like I said, I straight up just said no. Like I was.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating.
I'll just get right into it. But I mean, he clearly had an erection. Like I
Ugh.
felt it. Like,
Yeah, me too.
I clearly saw and I felt it, and that whole talk about he's incapable of any sexual action is just complete bullshit.
Even after I had felt his erection, because he'd also forced me to give him a hand job on
Talking to nobody.
No,
Fuck
because
that.
you
You go fucking jerk him off. I don't care.
on 2 separate occasions. Once during a Mahunt meeting in front of about 30 people who didn't know what was happening because it was under his copy.
I got called up to Nithyananda's room, and it was just me and him and one other person, but that person left. And that person was actually by himself with Nithyananda too, because I had to go, he told me to go get something, some Oshida, some powder that he made, and I came back, and I was probably gone for like 20 minutes. So I don't know what happened with them two, but I'm sure the same thing, if not more, happened. The same thing happened with me. So then he leaves, and I'm just there with him, and I'm on his bed, and actually what happened to me, I was also in the room with the other person, and we started off pressing his feet, pressing his hands, and then gradually worked all the way up to a full body massage, with oil, massage oil and everything. And he's being very lovey-dovey and saying like how much we're integrated and how much we're devoted and how much we are in love with him and how much he's in love with us and soulmate, you're my life partner or something like that. He used to always say that, like, you are my soulmate, you are my beloved. That's what he was saying, and like really coming on in like a flirty manner. And he called me up because I was a part of a character assassinating attempt on Jedial. Was my dear friend. I tried reaching out to him many times, and he is still very paranoid and afraid that the cult is going to lash attacks on him, black magic or physical. So he's like steered completely away. But I had the privilege of talking to him when I first got back in May, and he told, like, it was on video chat. He told me everything, like what happened. I mean, he got framed for trying to rape my yoga swami, which is complete false. And I talked with a few devotees who were very close with me at the time when I was there, and they know it's complete false. And I was a part of, the story, and I had to post on Facebook completely, like, bashing him so bad, which now I regret doing that. And so I got praised for it by Nithyananda, what I was doing with him was sexual acts with him. And I was on his bed, like, he worked me up, it happened super gradual, but it led to me masturbating him, it led to me doing that, and it was going on, and he put my hand there pretty much. Like, I didn't want to do it. I felt very uncomfortable doing it, and I was even uncomfortable with me being asked or demanded to get on his bed. Like, it was like 5 years in, so much of indoctrination, so much of like conditioning done by the guru. And first of all, I saw him as a god, like, entirely. I think that's a part of what is wrong, to be honest, because I mean, if we're made in God's image, and I think that's a cult tactic to shut down. Of course it was. Not able to talk, yeah. And like, sex is natural, and I think if it's done in a very conscious way, it's great. And like,
yeah, absolutely.
To be stripped of our natural human elements.
The actual reason I left the cult of Nithyananda last August. I'd like to give a little bit of background information as to what prompted me to leave that organization. She named 5 of my friends, including Vinuta and her husband, who took their kid out of the Gurukul, including my friend Jordan, who had been there. He took over the social media team after I left, including a lady named Marion Braun from Germany, who was heading the causing team, making people make the phone calls, and a lady named Shreya Parikh, who was from Australia, who was also a longtime volunteer. They made a post on his page saying these 5 people are anti-Hindu elements, and that, and also a man named Ashim from New York, that these people are anti-Hindu elements and that they were running a drug smuggling ring inside the Adinam. Now, that's when I decided to go public about the child abuse. when that post was made, I decided to strike preemptively before they accuse me of also being something stupid like a drug smuggler. That none of these people were drug smugglers. These were all sincere people who gave all the money they had in the world and dedicated years of their lives to volunteering for this organization that bullied them. The only crime they were guilty of was waking up from the brainwashing and warning other people to get out. So I made a post the next day describing that whole incident of these kids in Toronto. I was sent to Toronto, and so were a team of people from around the world. There was a lady named Dr. Deborah Chance from London component of so including England, Monaco, and told not to tell each other. And of course, you know, when we started chatting with each other, it came up that we were each told to find a way to contact Prime Minister Trudeau. And all of us ladies were downstairs. The two kids were upstairs with their chaperone from the school. And we didn't know what this December 31st meant. So I asked her, what beatings are you talking about? And she said that on the morning of December 31st, 2017, and this was in the middle of one of those December programs, the head teacher, I was a Gurukul Acharya at the time. I was one of the people who taught a class on a regular basis to the kids. That's why they had a personal relationship with me. I was one of the few people in the organization who had approval from the power structure, the authorities, meaning Nithyananda himself. The head teacher of their Gurukul had stormed into the girls' dorm at about 4 a.m. before the girls got up in the morning and started yelling at all of them that people paid thousands of dollars to be here to develop the superpowers of the third eye, and the program is a failure. None of the participants are manifesting these powers. And she told these kids it was their fault. She said that if they had the proper devotion to the guru, they would have connected with participants in something called Shaktipada, or like entanglement. These kids, it's your fault the program is a failure. You are causing pain to Nithyananda. Now you have to feel his pain. And she made one of the girls hold her stick and beat every other kid in the room, one by one. And she said, until they bleed or they cry, keep beating. So some kids had black eyes, some kids were bleeding, they all had visible bruises. And they were then chained up, locked in that dorm. So some kids had black eyes, some kids were bleeding, they all had visible bruises. And they were then chained up, locked in that dorm, in kind of a caged off area of the dorm until their visible injuries were healed. So they were kept away from everybody else in the campus for 1 week. Yeah. I was still brainwashed enough that I believed that even though the kids had been beaten, maybe the fault or the responsibility is in the teachers. I was a Gurukul Acharya at the time. I was one of the people who taught a class on a regular basis to the kids. That's why they had a personal relationship with me. I was one of the few people in the organization who had approval from the power structure, the authorities, meaning Nithyananda himself. The head teacher of their Gurukul had stormed into the girls' dorm at about 4 a.m. before the girls got up in the morning and started yelling at all of them that people paid thousands of dollars to be here to develop the superpowers of the third eye, and the program is a failure. None of the participants are manifesting these powers. And she told these kids it was their fault. She said that if they had the proper devotion to the guru, they would have connected with participants in something called Shaktipada, or like entanglement. These kids, it's your fault the program is a failure. You are causing pain to Nithyananda. Now you have to feel his pain. And she made one of the girls hold her stick and beat every other kid in the room, one by one. And she said, until they bleed or they cry, keep beating. So some kids had black eyes, some kids were bleeding, they all had visible bruises. And they were then chained up, locked in that dorm. So some kids had black eyes, some kids were bleeding, they all had visible bruises. And they were then chained up, locked in that dorm, in kind of a caged off area of the dorm until their visible injuries were healed. So they were kept away from everybody else in the campus for 1 week.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I desperately wanted to report the attack to the police, but I was prevented from doing so by a lady who was the Mahant of Europe, who also happened to be there in Toronto at the time. She told me, don't call the police, report this internally to Nithyananda. So I sent him a message via his main secretary, his right-hand person.
And it took me a full year of deprogramming myself before I finally had the strength and the courage to speak up about all of this. And that's when I realized really I had to take this to the public. And I mean, people have lost their life savings to attend programs because they were promised that after making a payment, the money would just reappear in their bank accounts. And because of the brainwashing, I was one of the people who promoted that silly, stupid idea. And I want to really apologize to all of you who have watched my videos who have maybe made that mistake yourselves because I encouraged you to. And I want you to know now that not only I'm sorry, but you're not the only ones. So many people were abused